41,000 years ago, the sky didn't just glow, it bled. Auroras ripped across the equator. Radiation levels spiked so violently that ancient humans fled into caves, carving strange symbols as if warning whoever came next. But the cosmic storm was only half the nightmare, because when the world darkened, when food chains collapsed, when fear turned to desperation, some human groups turned on the only resource left: each other. What if one celestial event, the atom's geomagnetic disaster, didn't just alter Earth's magnetic field, but rewired the fate of humanity itself? "41,000 years ago, long before cities, pyramids, or even written language, the first warning came not from the ground, but from the sky. At first, no one understood it. The night began to pulse with a red glow, not the soft ribbon of an aurora, but a violent curtain of blood-colored light stretching from one horizon to the other. It flickered, then thrashed, as if the sky itself was being torn open. For the small bands of early humans scattered across Ice Age Australia, Siberia, Europe, and beyond, this wasn't a natural display. This was an omen. Elders whispered that the spirits were angry. Hunters believed the world was nearing its end. Children clung to their mothers as the air crackled, animals bolted from forests, and birds abandoned entire regions overnight. And then came the second sign. A sudden, sharp drop in Earth's magnetic field, something no human could see, but everyone could feel. Skin tingled. Migratory paths derailed. Thunderstorms formed out of clear skies. The world's natural shield against cosmic radiation had collapsed to nearly nothing in regions closest to the magnetic poles. People began suffering strange burns, not from fire, from radiation raining directly onto the surface. Trees recorded it, locking the chaos into their rings. Even now, those rings show carbon spikes so severe that scientists can pinpoint the exact moment. Earth's invisible barrier failed. Fear spread faster than the storm itself. Families abandoned open plains. They rushed into caves, into darkness, carrying torches and whatever food they had. And deep inside those limestone chambers, they carved symbols, spirals, figures, warnings, as if trying to communicate with future humans. Something happened here, and we survived. Barely. Inside those caves, life changed instantly. The world outside had become unpredictable. A place where the sky glowed at night, where storms gathered without warning, where animals that once roamed confidently now acted skittish, paranoid, disturbed. Hunters who once tracked megafauna by instinct suddenly found that nothing behaved the same. Herds shifted migration routes by hundreds of miles. Some species simply vanished from familiar valleys, as if sensing something humans could not. For early humans, this wasn't just environmental chaos. It was psychological warfare. Imagine being an ancient hunter, stepping out of your shelter at dawn, only to watch the entire horizon shimmer with green and red light. Imagine never knowing if it was safe to stay in the open for more than a few minutes. Imagine children asking why the sky was broken, and having no answer that eased their terror. To cope, people turned inward, literally. Communities that once camped beneath open skies began moving permanently into caves and rock shelters. Fires burned constantly, not because of cold, but because light felt safe, familiar, human. Those flickering flames projected shadows on cave walls, and soon, those shadows became stories. And those stories became carvings and paintings. Iron-rich pigments were ground into dust. Fingers pressed shapes onto stone, not art messages. A record of chaos, a warning for the next generation. Meanwhile, the cosmic radiation didn't stop. It intensified. Researchers now believe radiation levels spiked 10, even 20 times higher than normal during the Adams event. And while our ancestors didn't understand the physics, they understood the consequences. Sickness, weakened immune systems, sudden deaths, and a creeping sense that the world was turning hostile. And yet, despite the terror, one truth became clear. Humanity was changing, adapting at a pace nature had never forced before. As the storm intensified, survival became a test of instincts older than language. Every choice mattered: where to shelter, when to hunt, whether to stay or flee. The world's magnetic field, once a stable invisible shield, now flickered unpredictably. Compasses didn't exist, but migration patterns, wind behavior, even the way smoke rose from a fire. Everything was off. The environment no longer followed rules. Humans were forced into constant vigilance. Some groups abandoned entire regions, heading south in search of more stable skies. Others clung to familiar caves, turning them into fortified sanctuaries. Families huddled together, rationing what little food they had, listening to strange atmospheric crackles echo through the night. Hunters ventured out only when absolutely necessary, moving low, fast, and silent, as if the sky itself were stalking them. But adaptation wasn't just physical, it was behavioral. This was the moment when storytelling became more than entertainment. It became survival technology. Around fire pits, elders repeated warnings, myths, and memories of the skies, drilling fear into young minds so they'd never forget caution. These stories, half truth, half supernatural interpretation, may have been among humanity's earliest attempts to preserve knowledge across generations. And meanwhile, something else was happening. Deep inside these caves, where radiation couldn't reach, humans began creating some of the earliest known symbolic artworks. Spirals, hand stencils, animal figures, each carved or painted with urgency. These weren't decorations. They were cognitive evolution made visible. A species pushed to its limits was beginning to think in new ways, imagine new meanings, and document the unexplainable. The Adam's event wasn't just a cosmic disaster. It was a forge, and humanity was the metal inside it. Under pressure, under fear, under a bleeding sky, we were becoming something new. When the sky finally dimmed and the auroras began to fade, humanity expected relief. Instead, the real disaster was just beginning. The Adam's event didn't merely disturb the sky. It sabotaged Earth's climate in ways early humans could feel instantly. Weather patterns lurched out of balance. Seasons twisted unpredictably. Rains failed. Frost appeared at strange times of the year. Entire ecosystems, already fragile in the Ice Age, buckled under the stress. And when the environment breaks, hunger follows. Large prey animals, the backbone of human survival, were suddenly unreliable. Mammoths shifted migration routes and sometimes didn't return at all. Giant kangaroos, diprotodons, and other megafauna in Australia began dying off in clusters. Confused by the erratic skies and poisoned by altered vegetation, scavengers left bones untouched, a sign the food web itself was collapsing. Humans tried to adapt, but every solution led to another problem. Foraging became unpredictable. Plants that normally sprouted during the wet season failed to grow. Rivers dried early, fish disappeared, and the once reliable coastal shellfish beds became toxic after repeated solar radiation blasts. A silent dread began spreading. What happens when the world can no longer feed us? Those living in caves burned through stored food faster than expected. Small children cried through the night from hunger. Adults sacrificed their portions so the young could survive, weakening themselves with each passing week. Hunters returned empty-handed more often, their faces gaunt, eyes sunken, steps slow. The environment wasn't just failing, it was strangling them. And with starvation closing in, human behavior began to shift in darker directions. Unity fractured. Desperation grew. Moral boundaries blurred, because when a species stares extinction in the face, not everyone chooses the same path to survive. Starvation is a slow, merciless teacher. At first, communities tried to endure it with dignity, rationing carefully, sharing what little remained, tightening their belts, and hoping the storms would end. But hunger changes how the mind works. It sharpens fear. It dulls compassion. It turns whispers into accusations, and small disputes into threats. And beneath the caves, beneath the flickering firelight, something ancient and primal began to surface. It started quietly. A hunter failed to return from an expedition. His companions said he slipped, fell into a ravine, and died instantly. They carried back no body, only the story. Elders nodded, but their eyes lingered on the hunter's empty hands. No meat, no hide, nothing but excuses. The next week, a child disappeared. At first, wolves were blamed. But there were no tracks. No blood outside the cave. No drag marks. Mothers held their children closer. Men stood watch through the night. Firelight stretched deeper into the cave walls as if trying to expose hidden truths. And soon, the truth surfaced on its own. Archaeologists today find bones from this period, human bones bearing cut marks, marrow extraction, even scorch patterns from cooking fires. These aren't the signs of ritual cannibalism or warfare. These are the marks of starvation, of survival, the kind performed by people who did not want to die. For some groups, the shame was unbearable. Cannibalism wasn't a choice, it was a nightmare they entered unwillingly. But for others, the taboo began to erode. Hunger does that. Once the line is crossed, crossing it again becomes easier. Food is food when there is none. And while most humans resisted the urge, refusing to harm their own, a minority embraced the darkness fully, reshaping their identity around survival at any cost. These were the groups the world would later whisper about, the ones who walked out of the Adams event, changed forever. By the peak of the crisis, hunger had become a presence, a living thing that followed every group like a shadow. It dictated choices, reshaped traditions, and carved a permanent mark into the psyche of early humans. But it also revealed something deeper: who we become when everything is stripped away. Some communities chose compassion. They pooled resources, shared every scrap, and moved together with a sense of unity rarely seen in prehistory. These groups buried their dead quickly, honored them, and refused to cross the final moral boundary. Their strength didn't come from food, it came from each other. And in many cases, that unity was exactly what kept them alive long enough for the environment to stabilize. Again, others tried to stay neutral. They avoided conflict, avoided strangers, and avoided taking from others. They walled themselves inside their caves, reducing contact to nothing. Their world shrank to a few dozen familiar faces. These groups survived by sheer caution, never thriving, never collapsing, just barely holding on. But then there were the outliers, the ones who looked at starvation, not with fear, but with calculation. For them, the Adams event didn't create desperation, it created opportunity. They preyed on weakened groups, raided shelters, ambushed lone travelers. Archaeological evidence from this period shows clusters of butchered human bones far from any settlement. Signs of organized cannibalistic hunting. Not simple survival. These weren't monsters. These were humans. Pushed past the edge, their existence forced everyone else to change, to move, to hide, to defend, to adapt faster than ever before. In a twisted way, these cannibal clans acted as evolutionary pressure, pushing peaceful communities toward tighter bonds, stronger strategies, and safer migrations. And so, in a world warped by cosmic radiation and collapsing ecosystems, humanity split along lines of morality, strategy, and desperation. From that fracture, new behaviors were born, and the species that would someday dominate the planet was being forged in fire, fear, and hunger. When the Adams event finally weakened, when the skies dimmed and the storms calmed, humanity emerged, blinking into a world that felt both familiar and entirely new. The crisis had carved deep scars across the planet, in forests, in animal populations, and in the minds of those who survived. But what scientists now suspect is astonishing. The disaster didn't just threaten humanity, it may have accelerated our evolution. The people who walked out of those caves were not the same as the ones who entered. Across multiple regions, archaeologists begin to see sudden changes, not gradual shifts, but explosive leaps in behavior, creativity, and cognition. New types of tools appear: finer blades, more efficient spear points, specialized scrapers, and complex hunting systems designed to conserve energy and maximize efficiency. These weren't small refinements. These were innovations born from necessity. When the world tried to kill us, we responded by becoming smarter, symbolic thinking. The ability to represent ideas through images, patterns, and rituals surged dramatically. Cave art became more complex. Burials became meaningful. Red ochre, once used sparingly, now appeared in deliberate patterns, as if humans were trying to define identity and purpose in a world that had nearly erased them. Some anthropologists believe this is when early humans began shaping the foundations of religion, not as philosophy, but as a coping mechanism forged in catastrophe. And beneath all these cultural leaps, another transformation may have been happening quietly, a biological one. Genetic changes tied to immunity, stress response, and cognitive flexibility appear to cluster around this time period. It's as if the pressure of the Adams event filtered humanity, selecting for individuals who could adapt, think abstractly, cooperate, and innovate faster than any hominin before them. Humanity wasn't just surviving, we were evolving into the species that would one day dominate the Earth. As the climate slowly steadied and the cosmic radiation faded, humans began scattering out from their cave sanctuaries, cautiously at first, then with growing confidence. But everywhere they went, they carried the memory of the storm, and those memories shaped how they built the future. The first transformation was social. Before the Adams event, human groups were small, loose, and often disorganized. But after facing starvation, predators, and cannibal clans, survival demanded something new: cohesion. Groups that learned to coordinate hunts, share knowledge, and protect each other gained enormous advantages. This is when archaeologists start seeing complex hearth sites, large communal living spaces, and hunting strategies that required cooperation. From dozens of individuals, the disaster had forced humans to choose between unity or extinction. But the second transformation was technological. In the centuries after the crisis, the archaeological record shows an explosion of inventions: finely carved spear throwers, composite tools with multiple materials, heat-treated stone blades, bone needles for fitted clothing, early traps, and long-distance hunting networks. These weren't the innovations of a comfortable species. They were the desperate creativity of survivors who had learned the cost of being unprepared. Every invention was a buffer against the next disaster, protection against hunger, cold, predators, and each other. And the third transformation was cognitive. Humans began planning further ahead than ever before, seasonally, then annually, then generationally. They learned that catastrophes come without warning, and so they started preparing for futures they might never live to see. This mental leap, from day-to-day survival to long-term planning, marks one of the greatest shifts in human evolution. The Adams event had done something profound. It had taken an early hominin, reactive, instinctive, vulnerable, and transformed it into a strategist, a thinker, a future maker. Humanity was no longer merely surviving nature, we were learning how to outsmart it. In the aftermath of the Adams event, some groups carried not just scars, but visions. Imagine a tribe standing at the mouth of its cave, staring into a world reborn. Sky storms had quieted, but memory lingered. Elders led ceremonies beneath open night skies, recounting stories in deep voices: how the sky tore, how they hid, how others starved, how they fought, how they lost and survived. These weren't just tales, they were collective lessons, encoded as ritual. Those rituals bound people together. They created shared meaning. They turned trauma into wisdom. In many regions, the survivors developed early forms of spiritual or symbolic practices. Rock art became a sacred language. Painted spirals, hand stencils, and red ochre patterns weren't random. They memorialized the cosmic storm, the hunger, and the battle for humanity. Some archaeologists interpret these symbols as early cosmic origin stories, proto-mythologies that connected the people to the sky, to danger, and to hope. More strikingly, the groups that emerged from the deep caves were different genetically and culturally. Studies now suggest that natural selection favored individuals with greater stress resilience, better immune response to radiation, and more advanced cooperation tendencies. These traits became more widespread, not because they were planned, but because they were necessary to survive. This transformation set the stage for what would become modern Homo sapiens. From these traumatized, tight-knit bands grew the foundations of our species' social structures, the trust networks, the shared myths, the collaborative innovations that would allow us to spread across continents. domesticate plants and animals, build civilizations, and imagine futures beyond the night sky. The Adams event, in a terrifying way, was our crucible. This cosmic storm and the hunger it brought didn't just push humans to the brink, it forced us to become something more, stronger, smarter, connected, and perhaps the greatest lesson of all. When the universe shakes you to your core, you don't just rebuild, you redefine who you are.